Great. Good afternoon. This is the House Transportation Committee. We're coming back after our weekend, and we're continuing. We're in the final stages of work on S99, our miscellaneous motor vehicle bill, and we have invited Mike Smith, the Deputy Commissioner, from DMV to come back in today, just to kind of close the loop on some open conversations that we just want to make sure we wrap up as we go into our final markup. Two sections of our bill, sections 4 and 35, that touched on in some way snowmobiles. Heard from VAST last week. So welcome back, Mike.
Thank you.
So we're interested in hearing an update from you.
So the record, Michael Smith, Deputy Commissioner for DMV. Excuse me. So there was some commentary, some conversations relative to registration stickers for snowmobiles that came out of the last meeting, I think, which was last Wednesday, it was last week anyway. And, you know, so we at the department have put a fair amount of thought into how this could happen. We got a couple additional emails this morning on it. At this point, we would ask that the committee push forward with the bill as is. We are not supportive of changes at this time. We would like to have the validation stickers. Our intent is to do away with them entirely. Sorry, I'm assuming I'm not speaking loud enough.
Yes. Representative Bartholomew, it's helpful and that might,
Yes.
thank you, Representative Bartholomew. Yeah, no, I think, yeah.
It was the,
Yeah.
so as I was saying, so we would like, our original intent was to do away with all validation stickers, the small ones for clarity. We would ask that the committee push forward with that and not make any changes. Continue with our initial intent. Stickers. Second section had to do with insurance. We are fully supportive of that and believe that people should be required to carry the proof and show the proof at the time of request from law enforcement.
Representative Shaw, yeah.
So Mike, you said the bill the way it is. We have some language in front of us that we drafted regarding the rules for snowmobile sticker requirements. And I'm assuming you would want this language in the bill.
Absolutely. I didn't realize that was part of the testimony today. I thought it was just section 4 and 35.
It wasn't, but I think.
But you're sitting in the chair.
Absolutely. Yes.
Stickers.
Yes.
Sorry if I stunned you.
No, that's quite right. That's quite all right. I've caught up.
So you have the language.
I do. I print it out. So yes, we would like this section added as well because this formalizes the removal of the validation stickers from snowmobiles. And it also is one other catch that was in there, and I think Anthea caught it in regards to dealers. And there was one other spot that required the dealer to have those validation stickers. So the addition, which looks like it will be soon to be section 14, we are supportive of and would ask that you include that in the bill.
I don't think, Madam Chair, that the committee has had a walk through this language from it.
Right, we were going to do that after we heard from Deputy Commissioner. We were going to move into that. So if there's questions about the language, I think I'll just give one a preview. I think what was discovered is that stickers showed up in a few other places, and so we'll hear Anthea walk us through more detail. But that's just no version of what that is.
Is this in conjunction? Is this yours or is this in conjunction?
So this language that Representative Shaw is referring to is something that he worked on with Anthea. Is that what you mean?
No, with VAST.
With VAST?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we asked them to.
No, I'm saying, was this in conjunction, so it was just you and Anthea? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I think just to make sure that we're not, let's separate the two things, because this is not, for sections 4 and 35 that the Deputy Commissioner came in and spoke to. We heard testimony last week from VAST that they wanted to keep stickers. And if the committee has questions for Mike on that, this would be the time to ask. And then this is a little bit, so this is,
Yeah, all right.
so I think we kind of jumped ahead a little too fast, but,
We may have,
yeah, so.
I may have.
Yeah.
So wait and hold on committee, we are focusing on sections 4 and 35, and Representative Shaw is just a few steps ahead of me, and we're going, we'll get to that, because Anthea sent an email yesterday afternoon of a revised draft of our bill and a few revised sections that we're gonna be talking through this morning. So, and it's good to know that on the one that we're gonna be talking about, Mike, you're gonna be sticking with us through.
For a little while, I do have,
Yes. So I think we're gonna start with this section too, so, but does the committee have any further questions for Mike about VAST, about some of the questions that Cindy Locke brought up, or, anything? Representative Walker.
I do just have a question in terms of, you had said that you went back to the DMV, you guys talked about the spot and whatnot. Did you have the further conversations with Cindy, with VAST? I mean, with
So
VAST
I didn't-
after our last appearance?
I did not until I sent an email yesterday because I hadn't heard from anybody. There was a few emails that were exchanged this morning in regards to some ideas that VAST has. Those ideas are problematic at best. So we're here to say we would like to push forward with the language as is. So, I'm sure there'll be further conversations with VAST down the road, but at this point in time, we would like to push forward with this.
And it doesn't impact their revenue or their collection or the process or any of those pieces the way it is going to, except for the display. It doesn't change.
Right, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. No, I think you understand what I'm asking. Go right ahead and anticipate that one and go ahead.
Yeah. No, it would not impact anything other than the validation sticker showing on the other sticker.
Which I understood from the testimony related to the enforcement piece is what they're most.
Is what they're most interested in. And there's, as with the whole entire sticker conversation, there's multiple people on multiple sides of that coin, and various different opinions about that. So which ones are more valid than others? I don't have an answer for that. I think that there are concerns, if you will, when I look at it from a, enforcement and process perspective. If you are stopped by law enforcement, you're asked for your proof of registration, your proof of TMA, and very soon, proof of insurance. So those 3 documents, much like when you're stopped with a passenger car.
And the, I'm sorry, I just had one of those quick blanks, but the carving out an exception for one particular mode or one particular vehicle over another is not a viable option when you're trying to save for the entire. That's what you're saying. That's
Exactly.
That's what you're saying. They're trying to cut out one particular type of vehicle or an ATV or a snowmobile or a large truck or a whatever pleasure vehicle doesn't work with what you're trying to accomplish with the modernization.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions from the committee for Commissioner Smith?
It's just one clarification. So you're saying there would be 0 savings, or the savings wouldn't be as much if we did a carve out?
If you do a carve out, then there's all kinds of work that comes along with that. And one of the suggestions that, VAST had put out there was, sharing a copy of the file. So, you get some privacy concerns that come up there, and then how's it get there? You've got some programming that's going to be involved in there. We're in the throes of a modernization system, for the department where we're moving into testing. We're not designing anymore. So we would kind of be stopping the process and trying to fit this in the middle, and it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. So it's an all or nothing. If we do carve out, then the manpower, lead powers would offset the, savings that we want to achieve.
Right.
Representative Couch?
Yes, thank you. And so if I remember correctly, having that validation sticker is something you can just quickly look at and say, well, looks like the registration's up to date, but to verify, you'd want to look at the actual copy, which is still required.
Correct.
And the snowmobilers do have a pass that has a sticker, that is you could quickly look at that and say, well, at least, they appear to be up to date. They're not, from out of town and never never, got up-to-date stuff, so.
I believe you're referencing the TMA sticker.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that does alternate color by
Right.
year. So there is that visual acuity that goes with that.
Other questions for Representative Campbell?
Yeah, I just want to be sure that I'm understanding. So the an idea that was floated, when Cindy was in here talking about VAS's position, was could perhaps could the VAS trail sticker be an effective validation sticker? And what happened with that? That's just not that's what's impossible for you to get back, to sort of redesign for right now.
Right. Right, because it's that data transfer, and of course, and that's leaving out the whole, can we transfer personal information?
So basically, it's too hard to sort of work this out at this stage of the game. Okay.
So Mike, just for final clarification, I mean, VAST is not an agent, right, of DMVs. Is that?
So VAST is an agent of the department for issuance of registrations for the department. So much like a dealer is an agent of DMV. However, we don't share data backwards. And I don't know if that made sense or not. So.
One directional thing.
Right, it's a one directional thing because there's privacy concerns and in terms of how that information is shared. So just want to look around, if this is the time to ask any questions. We heard some concerns. I mean, I'm hoping, I think the committee understands that with this modernization project, that they're changing this piece of, and generating secrets is important. And this is kind of the last remaining area where, and to change a whole system to accommodate this one small piece would be a real challenge. It just sounds like maybe VAST needs to kind of figure out how they can re-operationalize some of that, and hopefully the DMV can be helpful. I hope with VAST to help figure out how to do this. And this is all going to be operational. It's July of 2025. Is that when the sticker?
Well, the full system would be in the latter part of 2025, because again, it's 18 months and it depends on when we start phase 2 as to when it would actually finish. Registration piece will go live November 13th this year, which would be the part that
This would be part of that. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that there are a few phases. So. Okay. Representative Shaw.
Thank you. And maybe this is more of a question for Anthea, when we get to the language. Like you had, in our conversations, you had suggested a different effective date for the section than we had originally envisioned. I think it was earlier, upon passage.
Upon passage or July 1st would be good. So upon passage actually would be better because the renewal, so snowmobiles expire in August. So all the renewals will be going out in July. We'd like to put some messaging in there to advise the customers that you're not going to get a sticker back. So if this was effective upon passage, that would be best.
That's just this one section.
Yes.
Anthea, is that what we were talking, is that okay?
Fine by me. We'll craft that and would the committee be okay with that, effective on passage? Just trying to. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I think we'll shift the work. Thank you, Mike. You can stay for a little bit if questions come up. I know you're not staying for the whole afternoon, so thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
For all your help. Okay, so we have our attorney here with us, and Anthea, whenever you're ready, I know you have hot file folders and everything over there.
I was just making a note of the effective date change before.
Okay.
I got forgotten.
Oh, come on back. And for the committee, I know we had because of there's a Buck event, we lost a lot of the committee members, so we kind of ended abruptly on Friday. But we had gotten almost all the way through the bill. And so what I'd like to be able to do would, if it makes sense to you, Anthea, like maybe we can start with there's been some new language that we can, and then we can go to the draft. So that's what I would suggest that we do at this phase of the game, which is kind of what we to organize this. So I'll let you walk us through the different pieces. And Judy you shared an email yesterday with the committee, and for committee members who get paper, people have paper copies too. Right, and it's also on our website.
Okay, so for the record, Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I sent you an email yesterday after I lost power in my house for some unknown reason. I think a tree fell down, someone was doing some work in the neighborhood. But yes, I drove to the public library to get Wi-Fi to send the email. But so that email had 3 documents attached to it. It had draft 1.1 of your strike all amendment. That document's going to be 55 pages. And within that document, there is highlighted in green 3 placeholder sections. One of the placeholders is what we were just talking about a little bit with the stickers in rule. One of the placeholders is for modified language that was, or modifications to H38. That's the handheld use and the hands-free use and non-hands-free use bill that you walked through last week and had testimony from law enforcement. And then the final placeholder is for the possibility of a towing working group. So the 2 proposals for which there's the 2 placeholder sections for which language is written, those are the other 2 documents that were sent to you. And for the 3rd, there's not language yet. All that is posted on the website. The first document that you see is the strike all amendment. And then the second document, that's what passed the Senate. Now I'm going to start with the 3rd document, validation sticker requirements and rule proposal draft 1.1. So taking the committee back to, it probably would have been December of last year, so December 2022, when I started working with the DMV on what needed to happen with statute to eliminate the validation stickers. And through doing searches for the word sticker in Title 23, we identified those roughly 10 sections that are currently sections 4 to 13 in the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill. We didn't do a search and rule, and turns out we needed to, because there are 2 rules that are currently adopted and in effect that have requirements based on stickers. The first is the Department of Motor, the registration and operation of snowmobiles, approved helmets, and vast snowmobile registrations. And that's, you've got the rule number from the Code of Vermont Rules on line 6. And the second one is the rule on Vermont dealer licensing and schedule of penalties and suspension. So the first rule in subsection A is, or the first language in subsection A is notwithstanding small portions of that snowmobile rule and telling the DMV that despite the fact that the rule tells them that they need to do this, they should not issue temporary and permanent validation stickers, temporary and permanent validating stickers, or S stickers, all of which are referenced in that rule, telling operators of snowmobiles that they are not required to display any of those stickers, and telling VAST that it should not be required to maintain a log of S stickers or have unused registration S stickers available for inspection in DMV audits, or VAST, and nor shall VAST agents be eligible to issue S stickers. So stripping out of the rule anything related to what is like a validation sticker. And I'm hoping that the DMV is looking at this and saying, yes, this makes sense, all the stuff that you're pulling out. And then in subdivision 2, starting on line 17, tells the DMV to amend this rule to eliminate requirements related to these stickers that they're no longer going to be issuing the next time the rule is amended under the APA, 3 VSA Chapter 25. I'm going to pause there. Also, before I pause, I'm going to say This doesn't relate to the other snowmobile sticker piece. So separate issues, they just both happen to do with snowmobiles and stickers.
So, questions for the committee or any comments from Representative Shaw or any, if folks understand what we're doing here?
I did until that very last line,
Okay,
and you said
So
the other stickers being,
the other stickers being the registration certificates, which,
basically the license plates.
yes, the equivalent of.
These are just the annual stickers for, that's what I thought we were talking about. Thank you.
Language stickers were stuck.
Multiple places, things stuck everywhere. Okay, subsection B, very, very similar. In the Vermont dealer licensing and schedule penalties and suspension rule, and you've got the CVR number there is one section that has there be an administrative penalty that can be assessed against a dealer for failing to display a validation sticker on a dealer's registration plate. So it's saying, notwithstanding that, there is no longer an administrative penalty for not displaying a sticker, which makes sense because the stickers are not going to be issued. There shouldn't be a penalty assessed against a dealership that doesn't display a sticker that they're not given. And then similar to subdivision 2 in subsection A, it tells the DMV to amend the rule to eliminate the administrative penalty for a dealer failing to display that sticker the next time the rule is amended under 3 VSA Chapter 25. And based on the conversations that you just had with Deputy Commissioner Smith, what I would do is instead of the other validation sticker sections, which are would take effect on November 1 of 2023, this one section related to stickers would take effect on passage.
any questions for Anthea about this language? No? I don't see any questions. So I think what what we're intending to do here is to review this language separately, and then it'll be incorporated
Into draft 2.1 of your amendment.
So we need to have a motion for that?
Or I move that we include, to revise section 14 to S99.
And need more discussion? Okay, and then all those in favor of that, just by a show of hands. Good with that? Okay, terrific. Check. Thank you. Thanks. I'm glad that we found sticker language. We would have discovered it later, right? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so your next placeholder side language is the last document posted under my name, hands for use language. What is highlighted here is a difference from H38. And I tried to, and I included all of this in the email that I sent yesterday, address all of the assorted concerns and scenarios that were raised when you were talking about this language with law enforcement. They did not make the change to what the definition of public highway is. So underscoring the fact that there's still that split, this will be using the Title 19 definition of public highway. So same structure. It still has your definitions in the beginning portion of the section. One of the things that law enforcement testified to was that it shouldn't be using use if it's non-hands-free use, and that's confusing there. So I tried to avoid using the word use except for in hands-free use. So use of has been replaced with utilizing. And the one of the things that came up in your committee discussion that I think was sort of a gap in the language as it's written is when people were talking about, well, using the car connected via Bluetooth to the device to make the device operate in hands-free use. It talks a lot about how you can activate and deactivate the hands-free use with like a single finger or if it's securely mounted. But I don't really think that necessarily addressed the scenario that Representative McCoy brought up where, for example, her phone is in her purse and she's using the buttons on the steering wheel. So when talking about internal features of something, talking about an internal feature of the car or an internal feature of the device. So that would be like Siri or Alexa or something that you could summon without having to touch it. Definition for securely mounted. I incorporated, this is in subdivision C, lines 19 and 20, the fact that it's not affixed to the windshield in violation of section 1125 of this title, make things a little bit more, not concise because it seems a lot longer, but more all grouped together. And then for what Representative Bartholomew was talking about with a phone that's in a cup holder and whether or not that meets the definition of securely mounted, sort of strengthen the language that said causes the portable electronic device to remain completely stationary under typical driving conditions. So that's going to be it being in like one of those holsters or something else that's not allowing movement. I would say if it's in a cup holder, there's wiggle there. It's not completely stationary. So in order for something to be securely mounted, and remember, it's not saying anywhere that your phone needs to be securely mounted. It's just saying that for the purposes of the uses that rely on it being securely mounted, this is what it means to be securely mounted. So securely mounted would mean the portable electronic device is placed in an accessory specifically designed to support the hands-free use of a portable electronic device that A, is utilized in accordance with the manufacturer's specifications, B, causes the portable electronic device to remain completely stationary under typical driving conditions, and C, is not affixed to the windshield in violation of section 1125 of Title 23.
Representative Shaw wants to share. Yeah.
There's a
Well,
cup
perhaps.
holder design that Jeannie to acquire. Full disclosure, it's not exactly what she wanted, so she's taking it back and try a different design. But that goes in your cup holder and expands, and that holds your phone, and it's adjustable. Yeah, 60 ways from Sunday, however you want to hold it. And it's very in a cold, any kind of size phone. So it's very cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So as long as your phone's in there, you
Yeah.
can text.
You can touch it,
Touch it.
like use a single thing to activate or deactivate. But that's not, no, that's because you can only use it to activate or deactivate the hands-free use.
Oh, okay.
So you could use it to like poke the button to summon Siri and then tell Siri to send your text message.
Oh.
Texting is addressed elsewhere.
Yeah, and texting is dressed in 1099.
Do you have any? You look so happy. Do you want to have someone who wants to purchase it? I don't think they're selling it back.
There you go. There you go.
They're selling it.
But it's securely mounted in the cup holder. It's amazing. It's,
Kind of cool.
yeah, can't use it on the floor, so I guess Jeannie will give it back.
Okay. So I see a question, Representative Couch.
So just to be clear, in my car, I can put my phone in a little slot and I don't even need to access it. It's like it's in my pocketbook or somewhere. That's not, you're allowed to do that with this language.
Yes, it doesn't say you need to securely mount your phone. It says if you are utilizing, because there's language later that talks about how you can use you can touch it to activate or deactivate the hands-free use, provided that it's securely mounted. But if you are having your phone just in an area, a slot in your car, that's just where you like to keep your phone, and you want to send a text message and you like press the button on your steering wheel and say, send a text message to so whether it's securely mounted or not doesn't even come into play in this language. It's as if I had my phone in my purse or my pocket or the back seat of my car or my trunk. Just securely mounted only matters for when you are utilizing it in the.
Thank you.
Representative Bartholomew.
Using a personal example of why this might be problematic, I had one of the devices that securely mounted my phone and it promptly broke. So I created a little wooden thing to sit in the magnet and my phone sits on there. So two pieces. It sits in that little wooden thing. It's not completely stationary because it can move a quarter of an inch either way in its little wooden block. and there's no manufacturer. It says here, well, there's me, but it says utilized in accordance with manufacturer specifications. Well, there are no manufacturer specifications. Yet I think that kind of a homemade device fully meets the spirit of what we're trying to do. I know it's a personal problem, but I'm just using it as an example where I think that the intent doesn't match a real world situation. I don't have a suggestion for
But
fixing it.
how is, I guess my question would be, how is that different than it being in your purse? Like, you know, that is-
So let's go to where securely mounted matters. So for the exceptions,
right, it's
the prohibition of this subsection shall not apply to activation or deactivation of hands-free use, provided the portable electronic device is securely mounted, or the activation or deactivation is done through an internal feature of the device, or the motor vehicle is being operated and without the operator utilizing either hand to hold the portable electronic device. So in your scenario where you have it in this homemade holder, are you touching it, or are you touching your steering wheel and then just having your phone there because that's where you like to keep your phone?
Well, fortunately, I have a car that the phone connects, so I don't have as many problems as someone who might be retrofitting, building something themselves. But yes, if it's sitting right there, just like that device would be sitting, but, you know, so if I needed to touch it, I could.
So I would say that under the definition of securely mounted, you would not be able to touch your phone to activate or deactivate hands-free use in that homemade feature, because it's not, as you pointed out, consistent with manufacturer specifications. There aren't manufacturer specifications, and it moves a little bit from side to side. You certainly could change the language to allow more wiggle room there, but I think part of what you heard from law enforcement, which is what I was trying to address with the language, was trying to make it as black and white as possible. So there's not, oh, I was holding it, I wasn't using it, or, you know, it was in my phone, it was in my car, and I wasn't touching it, but I could have touched it, and if it, you can tweak the language. This was starting from a point of trying to have a securely mounted definition that really was what Representative Shaw used as his demonstrative aid, not something that was homemade. And that's a policy decision that you can make, and we certainly can change the language around and tinker with it.
I can think of two other examples. Some of those manufactured phone holders are on a gooseneck, which moves. So in that case, it's not completely stationary. And I don't have a car like this, but I believe that some cars have a pad that's designed for a phone that will actually charge the phone where it sits there.
But that's not, I mean, we have one in our car. It is certainly not designed to be securely mounted for hands-free use. It is tucked under an area that if you were trying to touch it.
Don't some of them have them in a place? I don't know, because I don't have one, but I've heard about them.
Your quips.
are you,
Well, those are just other examples where I'm not.
But again, nothing requires that it be securely mounted. And I would be surprised if a car that has one of those internal charging features doesn't also have Bluetooth, so that you can use your phone by touching a steering wheel. This is going to be a problem that basically technology eventually will get you out of. And then it is merely having it visible if you want to use it as like GPS kind of thing that securely mounted would be utilized for. But you are right. This language is written where it is not accommodating the DIY securely mounting holder.
And I'm fine with that. You go online, these things are like $9, $10. You can't afford it, $9, $10. I don't know. I mean, we could go around and around and find loopholes and any piece of legislation. What about this scenario? About that scenario? I'm fine with the way it's written. That's fine.
I have a couple other hands up too, you know, Representative Dodge.
Yeah, thank you. No, I was just, you know, I don't know whether it would be helpful to have an or somewhere in there instead of the ands.
I think you would want to talk to law enforcement because my understanding was this was supposed to be trying to be very black and white, obvious. But you could say is utilized in accordance with manufacturer specifications or causes the portable electronic device to remain completely stationary under typical driving conditions. So it's, well, you would move that to the beginning. So no matter what, it can't be affixed to a windshield in violation of section 1125 of this title. And then your options after that is utilized in accordance with manufacturer specifications or causes the portable electronic device to remain completely stationary under typical driving conditions. So it would allow for the DIY iteration, provided that it caused the electronic device to remain completely stationary. I think that would address your comment about it being on a swivel and also your scenario about it being designed. But I think it would need to actually cause it to not move if it's going to be the DIY iteration of one.
So a couple other.
Sorry, I just,
Yeah, sure.
like, I have bought so many of those little doohickeys to hold my phone for me. And when they break or I change cases, suddenly it doesn't fit in there. So I'll have to do, DIY things. And it's not that I'm not using the thing as specified, it's just that there's now an incompatibility. And I've found a way to actually make it safer than what the manufacturer specified. But I think, it just feels like it doesn't have to be the way that the original manufacturer specified, as long as it's keeping it still and doesn't allow you to manipulate, and easily take the phone out and it's not going to fly around in the car when you touch the button. It doesn't require you to take it out or remove it from its cradle.
Okay, I think they're
So,
Representative Shaw.
thank you. Reason for bringing this language forward is to close these loopholes that apparently exist in today's law, so that when law enforcement cites somebody for using a handheld device illegally, that it sticks in court. And therefore makes the highway safer. I think the securely mounted piece with the wording that it has to be as per manufacturers, I can't even remember where it is. Anyway.
116.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, securely mounted, placed in an accessory specifically designed to support the hands-free use of portable electric device. We heard of them using we heard of people using duct tape on their steering wheel to hold their phone, securely mounted. But not designed to hold the phone, so that kind of closes that loophole. Representative Bartholomew, I feel you're paid, homemade device, but it doesn't seem to cut it. And for Representative.
Yeah.
I have one over here that we could probably sell you today. And I guarantee you it will fit your phone. So I'm comfortable with the language.
I do think this is one of those instances where we have to think about what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And I think what we heard was there are concerns about distracted driving and how enforceable it is with the way that the current statute is. And I personally appreciate all of the discussion. So where are we as a committee? Folks, my understanding with some of this language too is that if we tinker with it too much, it's going to add more ambiguity into where we're trying to make things black and white. Representative Lamb.
I just wanted, as a sort of counterpoint to the concerns about the homemade and that sort of thing, one of the things that for me this falls a little bit into the category of is seatbelts, and we're very clear about how seatbelts work, and they have to be functioning, they have to be inspected, it's part of the inspection process, and how we strap in children and things like that. And so I'm okay with being a little more hardcore about this, because it's the impacts to others by distracted driving far outweigh the inconveniences to the drivers. That's how I feel about it.
If people nod, are there other comments that share here? Yeah,
I put up on the screen what I had said out loud as to what I think the rewrite could be.
Oh, okay.
If people are curious as to what is now suddenly on your screen. Not saying you should do this, I'm just saying this
You
is.
are so good with technology, Anthea.
Oh.
You can hear this, write it down and throw it up on the screen like that. And I know Representative Walker, you had a question, so.
A couple comments and a question.
Yeah.
Although it was really fun to see what the vice chair looks like on Christmas morning. A new toy. And I have somebody that I know, if I need something torn apart, I know that somebody can find the loopholes in it. I guess, I'm not sure, the question was, you brought this portion up, law enforcement requested it because there are court cases where the language is too broad and you're trying to close that down. Is that what is driving that? That's what I want to make sure I understand. And
Yeah, the word use was ambiguous.
And this helps in that pursuit of reducing the amount of people that get away with distracted driving. Thank you. I just wanted to be clear what we're trying to do and also wanted to throw in my little jab.
So maybe now, Anthea has kind of written something, so want to talk us through your minutes here?
Okay, so trying to address the scenarios that Representative Bartholomew brought up. So securely mounted means the portable electronic device is placed in an accessory specifically designed or built, so you could build it specifically for this purpose, to support the hands-free use of a portable electronic device that, and this is the requirement no matter what, is not affixed to the windshield. And either, and then it'll be A or B, is utilized in accordance with the manufacturer's specifications or causes the portable electronic device to remain completely stationary under typical driving conditions, and then there would be a period there. So I think that accounts for the manufacturer's device that has some wiggle to it and the homemade device that keeps the portable electronic device stationary under normal operating conditions.
Representative Couch?
Thank you. And I guess you could argue if you were to duct tape it to a wheel, your steering wheel, that's not stationary.
And I think that was one of the things that you heard from law enforcement, is that people did that and they were arguing that it wasn't stationary. If you didn't have if you had this securely mounted definition, you would be, and you were law enforcement, you would point to, oh, it's not completely stationary. It's not being used in accordance with manufacturer specifications. It's not designed for that. So.
How does the committee feel about this as a kind of a solution? Representative Bartholomew, does this address your?
I would argue that we don't need the word completely.
I would argue that we do.
I think it helps law enforcement.
What does it add? Stationary, completely stationary or stationary, what's the difference?
Well, I'm just going to interject. I think that we did get feedback on this language from law enforcement. Is that right? And so I just, because we could certainly ask them, but I'm just, we are down to, we need to be decisive here. And so do people want to, we remove completely or keep it? So let's get down to it.
Okay, but let's just keep in mind what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Here. As Anthea said, you're talking about that.
That's all you're allowed to
The
do.
right mind is gonna get pulled over by doing that.
Right.
So this is all, fun games, technicalities, but nobody's getting pulled over for doing activating or deactivating, whether it's completely loose or secure. I think we're just sort of making something bigger than we have to make it out to be. But with that, I move that we approve the language as presented up there with the word completely.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, folks, who's supportive of Anthea's? Well, I need some hands, so. You're not, no? Okay. So, what's,
I
So-
do what you want. I give up.
It's
All
okay.
right, okay.
That's quick.
Okay, so, and those opposed?
Well, I'm neither. I'm halfway. I guess.
Okay, wait, that's.
It's way better. I think it's way better than what we have currently in current laws.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I think you did some very, yeah, so all right, Anthea, thank you for helping us. I think we're gonna go, guys, and we'll get to see this.
In draft 2.1.
Yeah, so are there any beyond?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Might have some more discussion of the,
Okay, so going back to the language, in addition to securely mounted, it used to be that there was a definition of non-hands-free use, and this is instead saying that use means the use of a portable electronic device in any way that is not a hands-free use, including an operator of a motor vehicle holding a portable electronic device in the operator's hand or hands while operating a motor vehicle. So it's what used to be the definition of non-hands-free use, and instead it's just saying this is what it means to use a phone. You're holding it in either hand, or you're doing anything with it that's not a hands-free use. Then the balance of, and a definition that you don't see there is the definition of operating, which was used in, oh, here we go. So operating does not include operating a motor vehicle with or without the motor running when the operators move the vehicle to the side of or off the public highway and is halted in a location where the vehicle can safely and lawfully remain stationary. You heard from law enforcement that they would prefer if you just use the general definition of operating in Title 23, which basically means like to drive your car, but then have this be an exception when you're allowed to use it. So you'll see that when we get to the exceptions from the prohibitions on use, that this is one of them. So the way that it then is structured, you've got your definition section in subsection A. Subsection B says use of a handheld portable electronic device is prohibited. So that's your subsection heading, starting from the premise that using your phone is not allowed. Then it goes on to say an individual shall not use a portable electronic device while operating a vehicle. But it's split out. So while operating a motor vehicle in any place open temporarily or permanently to public or general circulation of vehicles. So that would, for example, be if you were driving in a parking lot. Or B, if you are a motor vehicle if you're operating, that's a moving motor vehicle. And then B, any motor vehicle without regard to whether or not it's moving or not, if it's on the public highway. So if you're stopped in traffic on the interstate, you're not allowed to use it because you're on a public highway. If you're moving in a parking lot, you're not allowed to use it because it is a place open temporarily or permanently to public or the general circulation of vehicles. So that's your overarching prohibition. And then in subsection C, or subdivision 2, you're getting to where these prohibitions don't apply. They don't apply to hands-free use. So if you're doing something that falls under the definition of hands-free use, that's okay. If you are activating or deactivating hands-free use, that's okay, so long as the portable electronic device is securely mounted, would be your new definition of securely mounted, or, and you've got another or here, the activation or deactivation is done through an internal feature of the device, so that would be Siri or Alexa, or an internal feature of the motor vehicle, and that would be like the buttons on your steering wheel connected with Bluetooth. And either way, the operator is not using either hand to hold the portable electronic device. So if it's securely mounted, you can poke it with a finger. If it's in your purse, you can use the buttons on your steering wheel. If it's tucked somewhere in your car and you have the ability to say, like, Alexa, call so-and-so, and it works and it hears you clearly, also would be allowed under subdivision B. And then finally, subdivision C, we got a few more. If you are using the portable electronic device to communicate with law enforcement or emergency service personnel under emergency circumstances, and Representative Dodge, this was your question for law enforcement, in response to a direction or order from law enforcement, this would be like if the road was closed, you would be allowed to use it. To use an ignition interlock device, no change there, and an E, no changes here. To use GPS if it's installed by the manufacturer or securely mounted in the vehicle. So then we're getting the securely mounted piece again. And then the balance of this is addressed in your definition of securely mounted. And then finally, when an operator has moved the motor vehicle to the side of or off the public highway and has halted with or without the motor running in a location where the vehicle can safely and lawfully remain stationary. That looks new, but that is just moving from what was the definition of operating. So it used to be in a carve out from the definition of operating. This is your exception from the prohibition on using it when you're operating. So you've got your definitions. Changes there are going to be securely mounted and the definition of use, which is covering holding it in your hand. You then have your prohibitions. They're going to be prohibiting it if you're operating a moving motor vehicle in a place that's open to traffic, or if you're in a motor vehicle on a public highway, and then it doesn't matter if you're stopped or not. And then you have your exceptions, and those are going to be hands-free use, activating, deactivating hands-free use, with more elaboration there, for emergency purposes or in response to a direction or order from law enforcement. Ignition interlock device, no change there. GPS, provided that it's securely mounted, and if you've fully gotten off the road and it's safe to be stationary.
I did receive a letter. I reached out to Lieutenant Raveling, who was on vacation last week, and I don't think we were copied on this, and I apologize. I just got it and I spaced it. He was talking about referring to Title 25 instead of Title 19 on the definition of a highway, and I know Representative Corcoran would have a personal, he'd have a vendetta against me if I suggested doing that, so I just kind of parked that one where it was, and we'll have to work, or they'll have to work their way around it in training to look at Title 19 instead of Title 25. But in 4B, 1B, page 2, 1B, down on line 12, his suggestion is make this more definitive and would aid during the judicial process should the offender choose to contest a violation under use. 4B1B is written as a motor vehicle on a public highway in Vermont, including while the vehicle is stationary. And I think we might have lost some of this language in one of the revisions, Anthea. We would like to add including while temporarily stationary because of traffic. Because of traffic, a traffic control device, or other momentary delays. Yeah, right there. That would be the sentence you would.
For the operating.
We would add, I'll pass, if the committee's okay.
I'm good.
And then he says this would not be construed to include extended delays caused by road closures that prohibit traffic that flows such as traffic crashes and covered later in the bill. So that covers, I think that covered your concerns, Representative Dodge. So you want me to just mail this to you?
I think I got it. So it'd be moving after stationary, so it's like comma, including, and then while temporarily stationary because of traffic, a traffic control device, or other temporary delays, period.
I think you could have had that in your original draft of the bill.
I did, and the reason why I didn't include it was because they were like, use the definition of operating. So it's like, okay, well, we don't need the definition of operating that's in the bill. But yeah, no, I think that makes sense, especially if they're saying that an area where they're having issues is people being like, oh, I was stopped at a stoplight, so that's why I was using that. I can make that change if the committee wants me to.
People okay with that? Okay. And that was a question that came up when we were in committee discussion. Yeah. All right. So are there any other discussion of these sections that India just walked us through? Representative Bartholomew.
We've talked about not holding it and touching it, but does this include looking at it, reading it? Is that covered under use where it says use in any way?
So
So for example, if you have your phone is navigating for you and you don't have a car that it'll display on the screen, so it says, look down to see turn right in another mile and a half. Is that fall under use?
Use says.
We don't want people, or a text message comes in, they're not touching it, but we don't want them reading
That's fine.
yeah, but is it covered in this?
So
What we have,
I do not think it's covered in here. I also think it would be incredibly difficult to prove that someone looked at something. So what I think law enforcement is looking for is like the residual evidence that they can find. If your phone is in your hand, they can see that your phone was in your hand. I think it's going to be a lot harder for them to be like, oh, you glanced down at your seat. I think you're probably at some point when there's more data on it going to need to address the situation that I can't remember who it was in this committee raised it, but they like said, well, I have a smartwatch and that buzzes and pops up. I don't think anything in this language or in statute addresses the looking at your wrist. And that could be something that needs to be addressed in the future.
well, that
from
was
a
actually
policy
my next
perspective.
question, is technology seems to be changing faster than our laws. And smartwatch is definitely a portable electronic device, and they're getting awfully sophisticated.
100% touch.
Thank you. I mean, in response, if the phone is sending the message to your watch, it's also going to be verbally, orally dictated from your car. If you're tied in by Bluetooth to this, then you're probably tied into your vehicle as well. I mean, I think, again, that issue will become obsolete with technology rather than the other way around, it seems to me.
There's a reason why cars now need to have backup cameras and Bluetooth, and some of it is because of this.
And I think we just scheduled some testimony for tomorrow morning. I agree with you, Representative Bartholomew. Technology is changing, and I think we're going to hear from V-Trans with their Highway Safety Division a little bit about what is going on in the state and also federally, kind of like what is federally with some studies. So not to distract us, but I think we're going to hear a little bit more about it. And maybe you could ask some of those questions there too. But in terms of this language I'll let you finish. Did you?
Well, I was just going to add, something's bothering me, and I'm supportive of what we're trying to do here, so I can support this. But I do want to point out that there are going to be people out there for $10 to buy a special device is a lot of money, and those are the people that probably have a car that doesn't have Bluetooth connectivity, and the $10 phone holder, like my $10 phone holder, will break. You need to buy the $20 one plus the $15 shipping. So there are some financial implications here that we seem to be ignoring for some Vermonters. I just wanted to say that because we keep talking about all the sophisticated technology that some Vermonters aren't able to take advantage of.
Yeah. And can I just finish my answer from before? There is, and I think Representative Campbell would have mentioned this if I hadn't, there is an entire statute section on texting, and that defines texting as the reading or the manual composing or sending of electronic communications. So I think if a law enforcement officer did see someone glancing down and they thought they were reading a text message, that would potentially be the avenue for enforcement if they didn't think 1095A was a viable option.
I have to say from personal experience, though, it is nice to look down and see how far ahead the turn is if you're getting navigation.
You have that. We're allowed to look at it.
You're allowed to look at it.
As long as you're not reading a text message.
Yeah, I think there was a policy decision made to treat GPS on your phone differently from reading a text message on your phone. Part of the reason why they're in different sections.
Okay. Representative Campbell, did I see? Okay.
I'm holding my tongue.
I'm sorry. No, it's okay. Okay. Representative Burton.
I was just gonna say, how do you think about radio in the car? Maybe you could just go like that, but sometimes I'm glancing over, say, oh, what station am I on? It's a little, we've already doing this.
I'm just thinking what our forefathers thought when we got our first AM radio in cars. What's gonna happen next?
Yeah, and they were
So
right.
that's all I have.
Right, so
I've got two changes for this one that I'll make. The modification to the securely mounted definition and the using the temporarily stationary language, moving that up into the motor vehicle piece. That's allowed, this is what it's allowed part.
we're following along, okay.
Oh, sorry, I had that reversed. The general prohibition part before the exceptions apply.
All right, now wait a second, now I'm not following.
Sorry.
Okay, so the change that we just made by the notes.
The securely mounted change in the definitions, and then for purposes of subsection B, subdivision 1, subdivision B, on page 2, at line 13.
Okay.
Prohibition is on using your phone in a motor vehicles on a public highway in Vermont, including while the vehicle is stationary, and then expanding upon what it means to be stationary to say, if it's temporarily stationary because of a stop sign, for example, you are still on a public highway and the prohibition applies, unless, and then you'll get to that in subdivision 2, one of these exceptions applies.
Does that make sense to people? Yes, I think so, okay. All right.
So now my question is, do you want me to start at the beginning and walk through the draft, or do you want to talk about the third placeholder?
I'm going to talk about the third placeholder. So, Anthea said the third place, just to do a little recap. Last week, after we heard testimony around towing, that had been section 34 in our bill, heard a lot of testimony about that. We removed that section of the bill. We also then heard from the bill sponsor of Bill 143, and the committee, we had some good committee discussion about that, and that and then there was discussion about whether that bill belonged in the Commerce Committee, since it's a consumer protection bill. So I think I sent this by email, but I just want to share it again. On Friday before I left the building, I was able to connect with the chair of the House Commerce Committee, and he was amenable to taking that bill, and he wouldn't be able to, that committee wouldn't be able to take any action on it this session because it would need to have some recommendations and testimony. And he requested, I think the committee had wondered about whether the Commerce Committee would have a vehicle for doing this, for including language about a working group. And he does not have a vehicle. The Commerce Committee does not have a vehicle. And since we have taken some initial testimony, we had the Christopher Curtis from the Attorney General's office in here. What the chair asked me if our committee would consider including language to ask that the AG would convene a working group. And in this instance, it would not have legislators on it. We have a working group comprised of, this was Chair Marcotte's recommendation, because he's seen this process through in other areas. Would it have the convene a working group with folks from various state agencies and have meetings and engage stakeholders, which in this case would be various components like the towing industry, bus and truck consumers, so on and so forth. So with that, I reached out to Christopher to follow up on testimony, and we had an email exchange and we had a phone conversation. And I think there's some openness to doing it, and he just had to confer with some of his colleagues. So where we are right now is, those conversations are happening in the AG's office. I asked Anthea to leave a little bit of a placeholder for this. Like if they are amenable to it, we would it would recommend some language. We'd involve Anthea in that process and bring it before the committee. but just wanted to, I think it could be helpful right now to see if the committee is amenable. If the AG's office is willing to do this, would the committee be amenable? Obviously, you'd have to approve the language that would come, but just in terms of a concept, is the committee on board with that? Go ahead, Representative Lynch.
Yeah, so I'm just glancing at the 1.1 draft, so
This isn't addressed there.
now a report on like the state reimbursements, which is different than what we're talking about now, which would be the consumer end of it.
Right, so, and that section 34 is not a replacement of previous section 34, was something that the committee asked for. I was confused about that too. That's a separate issue, and maybe we'll walk that, just to be really crystal clear. So the section 34 had been language about towing companies and businesses being able to have a lien on the vehicle that they towed. And it was more in the realm of like larger vehicles, not like, but it wasn't specific, it was like commercial vehicles. And we heard a lot of testimony from the banks and credit union and folks that was, they couldn't support that. So this would be, but we do know that there is a kind of, and I think for members of the committee, that the testimony revealed that there are a lot of different issues that are popping up. And this is not a new, Representative Rachelson's bill is not a new bill. These are issues that kind of have been coming up in the last couple of years. So we had discussed as a committee the possibility of doing this. And then Representative Marcotte said it would be great if your committee could do this. So are members of the committee on board with this idea of if the AG's office, the Attorney General's office is willing to do this, to include that in our bill here? Representative Burke?
I think this is a great idea. I think this is points the way to getting to unravel this issue. It's been around for a long time, and it was an issue. I'm totally on board with that.
Thanks. Other committee members' thoughts? Representative Walker?
I did some digging around since this last conversation and from multiple different spots. And one of the things that I haven't heard is overall I haven't heard is there's a divide, commercial, personal, perhaps urban, rural, perhaps not, how many places it impacts in the state, how many it doesn't. But the description in the Representative Rachelson's bill and those pieces that have been going on in some of these areas for a long time. And I haven't found anybody in law enforcement, in the city government, or in this building yet that can give an answer as to why Burlington hasn't chosen to do anything about it within city ordinance, et cetera. And that question really concerns me from a local versus a state. Is this a state matter or is this a local municipality matter that each municipality should address or not? Is it really a state matter? And that has been, that's unresolved in my view, but and perhaps this helps address that, but I'd really like to hear some answers as to why that didn't happen. But I also wanted to emphasize those kind of substantial differences between the testimony related to commercial activity, commercial vehicles, carrier liability, interstate commerce, how it is involved. All of those are very different, where the personal protection, the consumer person that came in and testified, there's issues around that piece of that as well, but it's almost like they're not even the same business. Towing implies everybody thinks cars, but the commercial is a much bigger and different animal. So those are my concerns. I don't know how large of a committee, how big of a piece is, but.
Well, it's interesting, Representative Barkley, because in my conversation with Chris Curtis, he had some questions, but I do think we heard in the testimony what was interesting to me from the Truck and Bus Association. There were similar concerns that they raised about the price of towing, the price of storage, what the rates were, like what was, insurance companies having some challenges with determining the rates and all of that. So I think some of that, I hear your point is well taken about whether, what could happen. But I do think that a working group could also help decipher and parse this work. Because I think what hasn't happened is the ability for some people to come together. And it's like there seems to be seemed clear to members of the committee, I think, that there was consensus that there's an issue here. But I think
I felt that way when I left on Friday, but looking around to it makes me a little more aware of the depths of some of the questions and some of where it's at, and a natural instinct, Black political ideology-wise, to be somewhat resistive of a statewide into a potential local matter. I'm not a no. I'm just saying that there's always more to it than what I maybe thought when I left on Friday without hearing from multiple other parties.
So I think part of this is that the legislative process is not always conducive to taking in all the testimony that would be needed to really come up with a resolution. And I think we heard this from Chris Curtis, that like a working group can be that forum and format that can help bring this, engage stakeholders, have a public hearing, would be a process, like have a few meetings, have a public hearing, engage those stakeholders and start to understand that. So, and just one last thing, that I think one of the things that he clarified for me is that, the working group would not be comprised of the people who it would be comprised of, for example, the towing companies wouldn't be on the working group because it would be almost, he didn't use this word, but a conflict of interest, or it's more about engaging them in
I sort of piggyback off of that. There have been issues in the past, and we use the transportation network companies and the sunset there. And that is very clearly in statute a Burlington situation, because they're the only ones that have the exemption from the state regulatory requirements right now. And that's a sunset that's been extended every few years. And you certainly could, in the language, while not putting Burlington on the working group, require that there be engagement with an entity that you think is sort of a necessary provider of information that you think you haven't gotten, that you think the Attorney General and the balance of the working group needs. So I think you could draft your way into making sure you're getting some of that information answered. But it would be totally a decision of the committee as to whether or not you wanted to call out specific stakeholders or anything like that.
I see some hands over here, Representative Burke.
I don't know if this is relevant, but Representative Richardson, when I was talking to her, saying, looks like we're able to do something or start moving, reminded me that, I don't know how many years ago, there was an incident in Brattleboro about parking. It was, I guess, just sort of saying it doesn't just. There was one incident when I totally forgotten about that. Somebody's car was stolen, didn't know where it was. As a student. Anyway.
We don't have the language. We don't know if the Attorney General's office is interested. Has the bandwidth to do this? But I just wanted to kind of we're in the final days of working on this bill. So I just wanted to update the committee and just kind of get a sense of the committee. Obviously, we'd have to bring in some language, but are people amenable to this idea?
Yeah, I'm fine conceptually with it, but with any working group, I think obviously we get some language. We have to give them guidance about the answers, questions that we want answered. And we should have bullet points, questions like X, Y, and Z. Whatever they may be, whether it's regulation, price, ceilings, or, whatever. Whatever the issues are, we should make sure that they delve into those. We're not limited to, but at least answer the ones that will help us decide where we want to go.
Yeah, well, and maybe a couple of people in the committee could we did have some language that was, I think it could be helpful for a couple of people to just, I think Chris Curtis got to be with us in the committee. I think he has a sense of what some of the issues are based on the discussions and questions that we had, and we'll certainly refine that. But also, I did share with him language that Bill Smith had brought, with this proposal on towing charges and practices that he brought to the committee last Wednesday, and it's in our committee documents too, that there were some ideas. This is not, I'm not saying we would suggest, but I think there are a couple of, there are a number of ideas out there that I think would just help us advance. And I think your point is well taken, like we have to give them some direction.
No, definitely direction, but I was just personally stay clear of that language, stay clear. Towing, that's all we got.
Yeah, that's how we got it.
The first ones. With somebody writing language, I'm not saying it's bad or good.
No, but
it should come from.
These, they should come from us, and these might be some of the stakeholders to engage.
Oh,
yeah. So, I thought I saw a few other hands. Molly? Nope. Okay. All right, so stay tuned. We'll, share something. Going to hear back from. All right, so that was the other, the third piece. I do know, I am aware that Representative Bartholomew, we on Friday, we were kind of rushing at the end, and we didn't get to one section. And I was going to suggest Representative Bartholomew that we could. There's some. This was the section of the bill that had to do with the DMV modernization, and so. Since that wasn't sent around yesterday, maybe we can get that shared with the committee, and we can do that when we can have that discussion when we get to that section. I think it's now renamed like section 41. And I think would that be all right with you if we do that now? We'll go from the top of the bill down, and that will be
Whatever works for you.
Okay.
Did you get it?
I did get it, and I'll ask, and I just wanted to check with Anthea. The language that Representative Bartholomew was recommending is not in this version right yet. Okay, so how about we start to go from the top down now that we've done these other, and then what we can do is is it okay, Representative Bartholomew, you send it to me, I'll send it to Jeannie to print up copies and send it around so that when we get there, we'll have it. So hope that people are understanding as I'm speaking very quickly. So. With that, I think now we are gonna turn to this next version draft of our bill. Okay.
Okay, so posted under my name is draft 1.1, 55 pages. This is structured as a strike-all amendment. We thought it would be easier to have on the floor as opposed to jumping between the bill as it passed the Senate and instances of amendment. That being said, there are not a lot of changes in the beginning portion of the bill. So I'm just gonna, as we go through, I'll mention briefly, like new motor vehicle arbitration. There are no changes and we can jump really quickly, I think. So section 1 is on new motor vehicle arbitration, no changes there. Section 2 is on the definition of mail, no changes there. Sections 3 through,
there we go.
Section 3 is the mobile identification, no changes there. Sections 4 to 13 are going to be your validation stickers, and that's going to take you all the way to page 12. So no changes in the first 12 pages of the bill as it came over from the Senate. That takes you to section 14. This is going to be where that placeholder language is going to get slotted in with the two rule changes that had to do with stickers, and that's going to take effect on passage, and you'll see that in your next draft of the bill. So this 2-page document, that's going to get inserted where the green placeholder is, and then the effective dates will be changed accordingly.
So just been checking in, everyone following along?
So are we on 14, okay.
Yeah, so we're on page 12. In section 15, right?
Yep. So now the reason why section 15 is highlighted, just the number, is because that used to be section 14. So we're now getting into a territory of section numbers shifting, but no changes. So section 14, now section 15, this was electronic proof of registration. Section 16 and 17, this had to do with the codifying practice of the DMV with respect to charging the pleasure car rate, even if it was a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle or a battery electric vehicle. no changes there. That then takes you to where there used to be the language on the statutory default speed limit for unpaved and unposted roads. That was sections 17 and 18 in the bill as it came over from the Senate. Those two sections have been removed, and you'll see when we get to the end that there's language on information being provided from the agency to municipalities. Why did that language move? It moved because the structure of the bill, for the most part, is trying to be in statute order, which is why the distracted driving language would then be slotted in here. So the structure of the bill is to keep the reports more at the end of the bill and then have the changes to codified law be in statutory section and then statute number, which is why it would be slotting in your other placeholder, the 4-page one, where the green language is with those two changes, the definition to securely mounted, and then the clarification on what it means to be stationary. Pause there.
Yeah, so that's the language that we just looked at together. Right? Does that make sense to everyone? Okay.
Okay, so then no changes to section 19 or to section 20. These were sections 19 and 20 before. It's slotted right back in, and that has to do with the total abstinence program. That will then take you to section 21 on page 23. Committee had a pretty extensive discussion. Oh, and what you don't see here is old section 21. Sorry, that was the motorcycle labeling requirement. That section was also removed outright, and you'll see the language about labeling incorporated into the motor vehicle study, and that's at the end of the bill. That's why we're back to having section numbers shift. So section 22 in the bill as it came over from the Senate had to do with the milk hauler permits and consolidating it down to the 2 paths to legally haul milk at 90,000 pounds. And those amendments are set to take effect on July 1 of 2023. No changes there, except this version has a reader assistance heading of amendments effective on July 1, 2023. Senate Transportation actually talked a decent amount about this morning, and I think probably what makes sense at this point is to not include what section 22 is in this bill, which is shifting those fees from $382 to $458 effective January 1, 2024, if, and I think the language in the effective date section is 10 or more fees in Title 23 are increased, and instead take advantage of the fact that there should be an indication as to whether or not this bill is going to pass by the time the big bill where the fees are going to be is getting sorted out. And I think what Senator Kitchell and the Senate thinks makes sense at this point, and obviously it's something that Chris, JFO, Becky, and I will need to track, is to not include section 22 here, not increase any fees in this bill, and instead just have what section 22 here be in the bill that increases fees, if that is what happens. But again, still something to sort of be aware of. I can keep it in here for the time being, but that's a question for members.
So yeah, let's have a, go ahead.
To translate.
Yeah.
You're suggesting take all of section 22, all the language, and we might see that in the big.
So I think the suggestion now is to keep section 21 in this bill. And that will, so long as the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill passes, which I think you're all hoping it does, shift from the 3 ways to haul milk legally at 90,000 pounds down to the 2 ways to haul milk. And then what was previously in the T-bill from the House Ways and Means Amendment, which would have been just increasing the fees based on if Section 1392 and Title 23 didn't change. So it's acting as if Section 21 wasn't enacted. and instead just increasing all the fees by roughly 20% across the board. And the problem there is if that language is included in a bill and it passes afterwards, it would be undoing your language here as section 21. But since there seems to now be consensus between the bodies that there is agreement on the policy approach of shifting to the 2 legal ways to haul milk at 90,000 pounds, that what needs to happen now is to make sure that that section that was an amendment to the T-bill that House Ways and Means made before knowing about section 21 basically should be substituted, taken out, and replaced with what you see as section 22 here, which assumes that 21 is enacted and increases the fees by 20% from the reduced fee, from shifting from the 90,000 pound all products permit being $415 to instead being $382. So short version is if you take section 22 out of this bill and everyone, JFO, Ledge Council, Senate, House, focuses on making sure that what is section 22 that you see up here on the screen is what's included in the big bill or whatever other bill the fees find a home in. And at present, that home is not the T-bill. Senate Transportation Strike All Amendment took out all the fee increases. Then I think you will reach the 2 policy goals. The policy goal of going down to 2 ways to haul milk at 90,000 pounds, and the policy goal of increasing fees by 20%. I think it can be done in conjunction with one another, and provided that this bill passes, it would be fine to put that in the big bill.
Is everyone clear on that? Yeah.
Are you good?
Why?
Are you good?
Why
You
be-
looked at, well, after the first explanation was like, and I was going.
No, I thought that's what we were, I
Yeah.
know that we had the issue, how do we keep track of this if we're switching it around? This seems like a great vehicle to do that, but I'm fine.
Sounds good. There's gonna be a big bill.
Leaning on
Either
you a little
there's gonna be a big bill, so we don't have, you might have some heartburn along the way, but yeah, what, end of the day, there's gonna be a appropriations bill, so, yeah, take it up.
So,
And from the perspective of if the fees end up not moving there, provided that, you don't accidentally have that old fee increase language end up somewhere, so long as everyone makes sure that that language isn't accidentally included in the big bill, this language being here, the section 21 language, that'll accomplish the lowering of the fee, the eliminating of the $10 fee, the shifting to the 2 methods of hauling milk at 90,000 pounds. It requires a little bit more monitoring, but I think enough people are now very aware of it.
I'm seeing the heads nod around the table. I mean, our committee struggled with how to do this, how to do our work around, and so it's the Senate is feeling the same way. Are people comfortable with us moving this section?
I think it helped that Senate Transportation was able to talk about it
Today,
on the record this morning.
Yeah, that is.
We all want to move in the same direction.
Yeah, so I think that makes a big difference, so that they have that conversation. So I think the committee is comfortable with this section.
So section 22 will now be a blank deleted section for the time being. However, I will renumber in your final draft. I'm going to keep it as section 22 deleted for the time being for draft 2.1. And then once you know if anything else is being inserted or moved around, it'll shift the numbers accordingly.
All right. That certainly, if that happens, that certainly makes it easier to report on the floor. But Representative Shaw?
Yes, is there any way to leave section 22 in with no language?
We can stay as deleted.
Yeah, would that give us a reminder that we got to look for it somewhere else?
Yes, and I mean, it wouldn't not be a reminder, but it wouldn't be you'd have to know what was taken out. But Chris was in Senate Transportation this morning, so he is in the loop on this. I'll make sure Becky knows. So we'll
We'll track it.
Yeah.
We'll be tracking it.
But if the committee would like section 22 to stay as a section 22 deleted, I certainly can do that. And it's totally fine to have a bill be enacted that has a deleted section in it.
We had 3 of them coming over here.
I don't know if we need it, but why don't we just, for now, like for today, let's do it. Because sometimes we'll go through at the end and then, you know. So
In addition to, and we'll talk about the effective dates when we get to the end, it's also going to take out the one subsection that was specific to section 22.
So point that out to me, just making sure.
Sure. So if you go to page 54.
I was like, what section? At the end of our bill.
Very end of the bill, you'll see that there was this
Highlighted, okay.
complicated language that said shall take effect on January 1, 2024, if more than 10 fees in Title 23 are increased effective January 1, 2024, and legislation enacted during the 2023 legislative session. If this language is included in the big bill, then it just would be effective on January 1, 2024, because it would be in the group of fee increases in Title 23. So all of subsection E would get deleted, subsection F would become subsection E, and subsection G would become subsection F. And I would make that change even if you kept section 22 as a deleted. Okay. So that is going to take you to section 23. These were the electronic permits, no changes there. And this is on page 30. There are 2 sections for that. This is what allows for electronic permits to be carried in the vehicle as opposed to having a printed paper copy for the overweight, overlength, et cetera permits. Then you've got your sections on title, no changes there. That's going to be sections 25, 26, 27, 28. That'll put you on page 34. You then have section 29. This has to do with non-resident title and when you can use bond, which would be if you were a resident for certificate. And then we've got section 30. We are now into our towing sections. No changes to sections 30, 31, 32, or 33. So these are the changes to what's a towable vehicle, what needs to happen for a vehicle to be abandoned, the shift from $40 as the reimbursement rate to $125, the elimination of the $16,000 cap. The elimination of the $16,000 cap is what caused the committee to want to have some reporting back, and that is now section 34. This isn't a substitute for any prior sections. This is just a new desire to have a report. It requires 2 instances of reporting. The first is an oral report to the House and Senate Committees on Transportation on or before February 15th of 2024. And that oral report would require the amount paid by the state under the reimbursement statute during the first 6 months of fiscal year 2024. So that's going to be July 1 to the end of the calendar year. And then it gives them a month and a half to prepare to provide the oral report. And a summary of any changes to department processes related to the payment for the towing of abandoned motor vehicles from public property that were implemented after May 1 of 2023 to address some of the concerns from the committee about, this system wasn't really working. They weren't paying money out. What have they changed? Second round of reporting will be a written report, same committees. That would be required on or before December 15th of 2025. And that would be the amount paid by the state under the reimbursement statute during fiscal year 2024, during fiscal year 2025. That would be the one that closes on June 30th of 2025. So it gives them almost 6 months to write the written report, but you'd be getting it before session started. And this is exactly the same as what's required under the oral report, a summary of any changes, department processes related to the payment for the towing of abandoned motor vehicles that are made after May 1 of 2023. That could be identical to what you hear in the oral report, but since it's going to be coming almost 2 years later, it could also include more processes that have been implemented. Oh, and finally, any recommendations on changes to state statute?
So are there any? This is reflect what the committee is looking for?
Yeah.
It's good.
Okay. Great. Right.
Okay, so it'll stay for draft 2.1. Then you have your section 35 placeholder. This is what you were just talking about with the Attorney General's office convening a towing working group. Section 36, no changes here. This is requiring the carrying of proof of insurance for snowmobiles. When you heard Deputy Commissioner Smith testifying this afternoon on section 35, this is new section 36. New changes to section 37. This is the federal requirements for the clearinghouse, the federal clearinghouse. Oh, sorry, I skipped one small thing. There was just language that said for showing the after the fact, that like grace period, it was within 7 business days of the traffic stop. We've been trying in statute because it's more clear to use after when it's something that's supposed to happen after, because it's not like you're showing it within the 7 days before the traffic stop. So that's why after is highlighted. That used to be of. Sorry for skipping over that. So section 37, the clearinghouse, that's the one that has that really weird effective date, November 18th of 2024. No changes to your purchase and use tax section in 38 or in 39. This is the title only transactions in section 38. And then the section 39 is the moving to Vermont and then not having to show that your vehicle was registered for 3 years in the other state. Section 40, this used to be section 39. This is the report on increasing gross weight limits on highways through a special annual permit. You heard testimony from the agency on this, and then there was a question as to whether or not they were going to be requesting changes to the language. They said that they're good with the language, so no changes to section 40. Section 41, this is the modernization language. So would it make sense for me to do the small changes in here and then shift to Representative Bartholomew's language?
Yeah, sure. And yes, thank you for pausing, Anthea. And also, Representative Bartholomew, I am not able to forward your email down. Would you mind sending your language to me? For some reason, and then we can get it on the, or could you?
Yeah, I have to stop my share though.
Okay. Or what? If we could just pause for whoever's whatever.
Big for it.
Okay.
You do too, I guess.
So
I
can
find it.
We're going to get some language. We could share it on the screen and people will get it emailed to them. We should put it on our committee page too. Okay.
Do you want me to send it to everyone or do you want me to just send it to Jeannie?
Could you do that? That would be great, Anthea, because for some reason when I forward it, the attachment doesn't get forwarded with it.
Okay, that should go to everyone on the committee and to Jeannie. And I can share it even if it's not posted.
Once you're done with that, maybe we should walk through the smaller changes and then turn the language around.
Okay. So to bring the committee back to where you were with section 41, it used to be section 40. Subsection A were just findings. Subsection B was required reporting. Subsection C was joint meetings, and subsection D was General Assembly oversight. So the changes that you're going to see in what's in draft 1.1 are some language tweaks to the findings. and then some changing in the reporting and the elimination of joint meetings. And then Representative Bartholomew is proposing some further tweaks to the language in the findings. So for purposes of the finding changes here that you have, it's in subdivision 8, where it previously said that a collaborative partnership between the department and the General Assembly throughout the driver services module monitored during legislative adjournment by, and it listed a number of committees. Two of the committees that it listed for monitoring during legislative adjournment, which is when the bulk of the work is going to be happening by the DMV to design and implement the module, would be oversight from the House and Senate committees on transportation. It was sort of addressed that when you're adjourned, you're not really a committee that can meet, but it's the members of those committees that would be providing the partnership and the monitoring and the feedback, if any, to what is being provided in the form of written reports. So instead of it saying, and the House and Senate committees on transportation, it would be saying, and members of the House and Senate committees on transportation. It doesn't change who the reports go to. The 3 reports, 2 of which will be during the adjourned session, will still be going to House and Senate transportation, but it's trying to be reflective of the fact that those are not committees that would be meeting during the adjourned session. And that's it in terms of the language tweaks to the findings from this piece.
I think this reflects what the committee was discussed, but the other people feel that these were, I think there's agreement.
But then the only other changes in the language that you have in draft 1.1 is it used to be 2 written reports, and they came on July 1 of 2024, and I believe December 1 of 2024. So fully within, December 1, 2024. So fully within the adjourned session and during the design and implementation before the testing portion of the driver services module. This instead would be 3 written reports. The first would be due on or before July 31, 2024, so a little bit later. The second would be due on or before October 15th, 2024, still during the adjourned session. And the third due on or before January 15th of 2025, right when you're coming back to the building and know who's going to be on the Transportation Committee. In talking to the commissioner and the deputy commissioner in terms of what they envision the schedule to be, January 2024, scoping existing processes, February 2024 kickoff meeting, April to September 2024 definitions and design. So that's the first report would be coming during the definitions and design phase. The development process would be between September and December of 2024. So 1 report in the middle of development, and then the January 15th, 2025 report would be after they think development would be finished. And then subsection C has been taken out. That was the 2 joint meetings, one kind of in the beginning of the legislative session for 2025 and one towards the end of the legislative session for 2025. Since you can have joint meetings whenever you and the other committee that you want to have a joint meeting with want to, it is not something you necessarily need to include in the session law. And then what was subsection D has been changed to just reflect General Assembly oversight in subsection C, and then just addressed slightly because it was talking about recommendations and written reports or from joint testimony under subsections B and C. And this has just been amended to reflect that it's just in response to written reports under subsection B.
Okay, so we're going to pause there, right? Just with the dates, I think those dates, you may have already said this, Andy, but they kind of align with the project timeline in a way that makes sense for the check-ins that they need, but also with our adjournment and if we need recommendations for the next legislative session.
And when I testified on the other language, I said, well, these are the dates that I came up with sitting at home late Thursday. I actually had a conversation with the commissioner and the deputy commissioner on these dates. So I think that they are more on board with when these dates make sense from their perspective.
So I know that we're gonna be looking at some changes, additional changes, but everyone okay with these? These are kind of tweaks.
Yeah.
Everyone okay? Yeah,
More practical and realistic and more sense.
okay. All right, so this is, then we will, in the same section, this is some language, I think that, that Representative Bartholomew, I don't know if you want to chime in here, set the context or Anthea, up to you.
This was the part that I was concerned because it said that the commissioner has had to make business decisions that conflict with statute and will have to continue doing that. And that could be interpreted, I think, as not a good thing. So Anthea was kind enough to help me do some more objections. She came up with this wording. And it's more words than I'd like, but I think it addresses it. It makes it clear that yes, decisions are being made as we're moving forward, but nothing's being implemented until we have an opportunity to adjust statute. So that's all this is intended to do, make it sound less like she went against statute.
Members also have this in their email too, if you want to see that, just moments ago from Anthea, people need some time.
Yeah, and so it's a change in subdivision 3 and in subdivision 6. Those are the two. And I can't show you both at the same time, so I'll put 3 up. Then I can switch to 6.
And as Anthea's pointed out to us, this is like findings, this is kind of findings language. So it is, I think it does address some concerns of Representative Bartholomew and others in the committee, just kind of just telling the story, but giving the context.
And I will continue to say, you could take out all of subsection A, all of the findings, and there wouldn't be that story, but it wouldn't change what the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles is being asked to do with respect to those 3 reports, and what the General Assembly is sort of putting its own expectation on itself, that it's going to provide feedback. Findings are not necessary. You can always take them out of bills.
In some cases, they're helpful in kind of filling in and connecting the dots. I want to give people a chance to read it or look up. Right. It's like I'm seeing people. It's like people have read it. Some people are still reading. Folks comfortable with this or adding this language? Have questions about this language? See, Representative Hutchins thumbs up. Okay.
And, there were some questions about, where it said make business decisions, what this defines. Do.
Other Representative Campbell, folks. You had some questions about this, so I want to make sure. We're not final, go ahead, Representative Bartholomew.
Intent here is acknowledging that changes are going to be required in statute to modernize our system. And decisions are being made, but nothing's being implemented until we do. And we're going to be told what they are. But no laws are being broken. And I think that's what this says.
I was just wondering, Representative Bartholomew, on 15, page 2, we should change the statute at the earliest convenience of the legislature or something along those lines to put some urgency into doing that?
So, one, it's a finding, so it's not necessarily like expressing intent. You could express intent, but I think from the perspective of, if you think about that timeline that I read to you, and I don't think this is like intentional at all on the part of the DMV. I just think it's the timing of how things are going to work out. If you think about your legislative session, by the time they're starting to work on the first piece of this, the definitions and design phase, that's going to start in April of 2024, kind of late in the game to be making changes to statute. And then it's going to be from April of 2024 to December of 2024 that they're finishing the definitions and design portion and the development portion. So by the time you're back in the building in 2025, that's going to be sort of like the earliest point that you could start to amend statute. And then because you know that they're going to be testing I'm not going to be able to do the math, but you know that the project is expected to take 18 months from February of 2024. So that's going to get you to like August of 2025. That's going to be hopefully well after you've adjourned. So I don't know if it's necessary to make any changes to statute before you would be making in your ordinary course in the 2025 legislative session. And I would also say that that's probably a question for the 2025 use to be making.
Okay, Representative Palmy.
And Anthea keeps reminding me and reminding us that these are findings. So the finding is, if we don't make changes, these proposed business changes, we don't make changes to statute, are going to be in conflict. That's the finding. Whereas what you were saying, it goes beyond what I think a finding would be.
I don't usually give up that easy.
I'm
ready to argue.
So we will be getting those I think that there's specificity about where the changes can be made. That was,
Yeah, in each of the reports, if possible, the DMV is supposed to be, I gotta switch language. The DMV is supposed to be saying what they think the amendments should be. So in 2, to the extent practicable, at the time each written report is filed, the department shall include recommendations on which provisions of statute and rule the department anticipates will need to be amended or repealed in order to best modernize, et cetera, et cetera. So you're hopefully going to be getting, if they find something in like the definition section, in the beginning portion of the definition section, you could be aware as early as July 31st of 2024 with that first report of what statute is going to need to change. And then you certainly could have someone, start working on language then for your 2025 session. But I think it's just like a nature of when the project is starting and how long it's going to take, that all the information about the changes is going to come, that they're going to need is going to come when you're adjourned. And then you have the entire 2025 session to make them before it's rolled out. Sort of similar to, and I'm going to continue to draw a parallel to the stickers, because this is sort of exactly the situation that they're trying to avoid, is they need you to make the changes to stickers. They haven't really gotten legislative buy-in until they started the process of working through the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill. And they're pretty sure it's going to become law, but not totally certain it's going to become law, and are sort of having to have the secondary plan for if you don't make those 10 changes to statute, them needing to still issue the validation stickers.
and in the findings, there is language that, kind of identifies which section in the statute are related to driver service processes, like which chapters. So I think my understanding from the intent in the Senate was to rather than just like throw all of Title 23 open, that it was about these specific chapters that relate to this modernization project. Is that?
Yep, and that's why that finding is in there. looking at the progression of the language, it originally had like a very broad notwithstanding, and admittedly, it was notwithstanding this provisions to the contrary in Title 23. And that really was a shorthand way of describing these chapters because it took some time to identify where in statute they think the driver services module will potentially require amendments to statute. And they don't know for sure whether or not that's going to be the case yet. And I think they've said it could be that nothing needs to change, but it could be that some things in statute need to change.
So how's the committee feeling about the Representative Bartholomew's changes? On board? Okay. I was thinking we've been at work for 2 hours. I'd like to take a little break. We take a 15-minute break. We have a little bit left to get through this draft. It's not a lot, but there is. I don't want to. We should take a little break. I think get some air in the room and stretch. So, would that work for you, Anthea?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Great. So with that, why don't we end